What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner and 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. Also, I host the only online broadcast in the world for dads and fathers, and that will come into significance tonight. That is sponsored by Dove Men Care. It's also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And I am the board chair for the Global Food and Drink Initiative, which is a multimedia not-for-profit that showcases Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, drink, and travel. And as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. This is an edition called Dad's Talking. Always love having these conversations, one-on-one conversations with fathers around the world that are doing incredible things. So a little backstory here. I have to give a big hail up to two people before we get started. First of all, Miranda has brought us new friend to this table, or not, digital stage tonight, and the National Responsible Fatherhood Coalition, especially this second organization back on August 18th. They had an incredible virtual conference, and the title was Leading with Compassion, Understanding and Serving Low-Income Fathers in a Changing World. It was a virtual event that it rocked me. And there were many, many sharers, not speakers, during that event. And I'm hunting them down in a good way, one by one, to get them on this platform. And the gentleman, or our new friend here, really touched the hearts of everyone that watched this live. And if no one was touched by it, I'm going to say their wood was wet. I'm just going to put it out there. Our new friend is Dr. Adolph Brown III. He worked with schools and corporations around the world to implement best practices that support peak performance and educational excellence. His honest, humorous, and helpful keynotes and workshops have been commonly described as, quote, delightfully different, unquote. He has more than 30 years of experience working with issues of mental illness, social justice, equity, education, and diversity. His solid content and multiple takeaways, insightful humor, and parables are appreciated and recognized by business leaders, teachers, administrators, students, and parents all over the world, and fathers too. From extremely humble beginnings, he was the first in his family of five to graduate high school and go on to be a critically acclaimed clinical psychologist, university professor, and dean, teacher, education, businessman, investor, research scientist, and recovering middle school education teacher. I like that, recovering. He considers his greatest accomplishment to be joyfully married to Maria. We now call her the executive producer. And he's the father of this many folks, 8 kind-hearted children, and grandpa of Aiden. We would like to welcome for the first time, gracefully, happily, and not the last time, Dr. Adolph Brown. How are you?
I'm outstanding. Thank you, Dr. Vi, for having me.
Absolute pleasure is mine. I have been waiting for this, as they say, for a minute.
That's two of us.
Waiting for a minute.
That's two of us.
I am so happy to have you here tonight. And I feel that there's going to be at least one life positively changed, either live or a replay of this conversation tonight. So looking forward to it. Let's start, like with all my new friends that come to the platform. Give us a little background, where you grew up, where you're from, life before you became the doctor.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a place called Bayside Arms, and I say that because most people wouldn't recognize that name. It was really referred to as the Bermuda Triangle, Dr. Bob.
Wow.
The Bermuda Triangle. You remember that place in the ocean?
Absolutely.
That people didn't know whether they would make it across or not. That was my neighborhood. My neighborhood, the law enforcement wouldn't come in. If you got hurt, you had to go up to the front gates for first responders. That's how I grew up. And I live 6 blocks from there now. So I'm not the guy that got the degree and left. I'm the guy that got it and brought it back. Mom and dad divorced when I was 2. After being married many years, my dad woke up one day and said, I don't want this anymore. And, Dr. Bob, I kind of wish you would have waited till I grew up to become a clinical psychologist, and I would have helped him with midlife crisis. So anyway, our lifestyle changed once Dad left. And My oldest sibling and only brother, Oscar, became my hero. He was murdered when I was 11.
Wow.
And right around the time that the gangs were pulling at me, where I'm from, the gangs in high school would come down to the middle school to recruit. And he was murdered right at that time. I was angry at the world. And of course, I became gang affiliated. I was on the wrong path for a while. I was thankful for my grandparents, my uncles, who stepped in when my dad left. And the rest is pretty much what you talked about. I made a choice, a conscious decision to get myself together, and I haven't looked back. Now, I will tell you, there were some really challenging points in my life based on the fact that the man I looked to as dad wasn't always there. And I knew my dad loved me. I loved my dad. And but there were some sticking points that I'm willing to talk about tonight, and just in the challenges as well as the triumphs of being a father today.
If you're comfortable with it, I'd love you to share some of the challenges and the triumphs of your younger days.
Definitely. Well, my mother believed in keeping me busy. So I am an acclaimed martial artist and boxer. I opened a gym in my community for young people and older people that couldn't afford the big box gyms. So that's one of my give backs. But even staying busy and being my mother making me take the most challenging academic courses, I knew very little about women, about girls.
Hey, no problem. Hey, the executive producer's in the background, so I'm sure she's giving thumbs up for this.
That's right. So I knew very little, and I didn't really become totally interested, until college, when I met the most beautiful, the most intelligent woman I'd ever seen in my life. And that was when, in college, as a sophomore, I became a father before I was a man.
That's very interesting, because in my heart work with fathers, I approach it from man first, then father. How was it approaching it at that age, father first before man?
Oh, it was extremely challenging. If she were in here telling you about it, Dr. Vibe, she would tell you that I didn't take it very well. I was doing manly activities without understanding the possible manly consequences. So when she told me, my wife's from New York, I'm from Virginia, and we met at the College of William and Mary.
Yep.
And when she told me that we were expecting a child, almost passed out. And I just remember all the things everyone told me before I went to college, that you can do this. We're counting on you. I was the first in my family of 5 to graduate high school. And my perception of college, I told my school counselor maybe in the 11th grade that I had no interest in going to the 13th grade. That's how I thought of college, because I had no references in the inner city projects. I saw it on television, but television is not real to those of us who live in the trenches. So when she told me, after that, I avoided her on campus. When she needed me the most, I'd see her and kind of act almost as if I didn't see her. And I guess my immature thinking was that somehow or another it's going to disappear. This issue is going to go away. And she told her dad, and her dad and I had a conversation, and her dad talked to me the way my uncles and my grandfather talked to me. He said, you and Marla, and her name's Marla, and said, you guys created a child together. You guys love one another. And now it's even more important that you come together, not necessarily to be together, but come together for the child. And he told me, he said, if you guys don't want to be together, that's on you. However, this child needs both of you. And when he said that, and he didn't say it with a grudge, he didn't say it with a shotgun, he said basically the same thing my grandparents had said, my mom, everyone. And everyone was talking about helping. And I guess what was so crushing for me, Dr. Vibe, was the fact that when I finally got my life together and I said, this is how it's going to turn out. I just, this is the plan. And then I realized that you got to be flexible in the plan, and you got to be faithful and trust God in your plan. And so, you know, my grandfather used to always say it's better to marry than to burn. And what he was talking about was lust.
Yep.
So and my wife will tell you, we studied together long before we ever, I mean, I was a gentleman, and that almost backfired because she didn't think I really thought she was attractive. When we would lay in the bed together after studying, I'd hold her without expectation. That's what I was taught. But again, when you do that so often, and I tell young people all the time, don't play with fire. When you do that so often, there were times after that, then she just said, I'll spend the night in your dorm room. And before long, we ended up making love, and we were with child. So that was extremely challenging for me. And I think looking back, I'm more disappointed, not in us, in me and how I handled it, because she needed me. She needed me more than ever. So when I tell people, I'm telling them the truth. I became a father before I was a man. I acted like a boy when she gave me that news. So I tell people all the time, young men especially, you know what? When you're involving yourself in activities that are considered adult activities, you got to make sure that you're an adult and prepared for the consequences. Mm-hmm. You see, we make choices, but then the choices make us. And every decision that we make has a future. So we were madly in love, but here comes our child, and we're still trying to make sense out of things. And we're trying and we're doing. I get a full-time job. I'm in school on an academic and athletic scholarship, and I started working full-time at Eastern State Psychiatric Hospital. You know, people ask me, you know, how did you become the youngest tenured university professor in the country at the age of 29 and all this? Guess what? It was because I had a head start. And it wasn't a head start that I raised my hand and said, hey, pick me. It was what I had to do. So now that I'm becoming a father, and I'm saying, you know what? I have to have an education because I want my child to know that his dad has an education. That was the first thing. And then I have to work, because having a child is about being able to love your child, care for your child, mentor, lead, but also support financially. And I worked full time. I went to work. I went to work at 7 p.m. in the evening after track practice, and oftentimes got off at 5 or 6 in the morning and did it all over again.
Wow. You mentioned the talk that gentleman gave you. And I'm a firm believer that one's journey is full of decisions and moments. Was that talk one of the times that you began to make a turn in the way you carried yourself and the way you thought?
Yes. You know, I had made a turn prior to that, because being in college was different than anything anybody in my community or my friends had ever done. So I had made the turn. But like I said earlier, you know, I had mastered the impulse control when it came to, you know, in our community, there was a lot of fighting. I had mastered communicating well. I had little experience when it came to women. And when I got to college, you know, I found a woman that I thought was the most beautiful, the most intelligent, and she thought the same of me. And I did what I knew to do. I just didn't know those feelings would come later to do more. And when I tell people that, and they're shocked that it took me that long to do that. Yeah, I had friends that would brag about what they did. But back then, you know, I was thinking, yeah, everybody says they're doing it, but I really don't think everybody's doing it. So I didn't really engage in the conversations with, my friends on the subject. I studied, I worked And, I was participating in wrestling, boxing, and track, and high school and middle school.
Wow. What kept both of you going in those early years?
I'd have to say the foundation that we had. I think a lot of couples today, what happens in the long run often depends on what you had when you got together. So I tell people all the time, the relationship may be made in heaven, but the work takes place here on earth. So the fact that we were very much rooted in our faith and in our faith walk, understanding that we weren't perfect, but understanding that faith and grace and all of that stuff is stuff that we have, even though we didn't earn. So that kept us going, and that kept us still being respectful of one another, engaging in other relationships after. Because my wife, girlfriend then, when she went home to have our son Kyle, that's our oldest child, she went back to New York to have Kyle and decided that she was going to take a semester off. I stayed back at the school. While she was there, she was being sought after, pursued by an ex-boyfriend. A similar dynamic was happening to me back here, in Virginia. So we ended up dating other people. We still had our son. We still did right by each other. I worked full time. Anything that she needed, she could get from me. She could get from my family. My family was extremely involved and supportive. The only disagreements we would have back then, I tended to talk to her about, if I knew a guy that she was seeing and I knew him better than she knew him, I would kind of like say, hey.
Enough said there. Enough said. Enough said. I got it. You don't have to say anything. Just, yeah. Okay. That's good. We're good.
All
right.
You're going to be around my son.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So then what brought you back together?
I think the fact that we never lost our love, and we both, I say we both grew up, but she was ready. I remember her telling me in college that nobody's ever told me, I want to grow old with you. That's what she told me. But, I mean, that was
that's a very interesting statement, Dr. How many couples that are looking to get married, do they say that to each other today?
I'm telling you, and I see couples in counseling all the time. We don't see it. And a lot of couples don't even understand the good and the bad. Over the last month, my wife's 11 months ago, she was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer.
Oh my goodness.
I'm joyous to report, Dr. Vibe, that she's cancer-free.
Wow.
Yes, that's right. However, it's a really long treatment process. So she's in the radiation phase of it now, just to make sure that it's not hiding. It's not unobtrusive somewhere. Mm-hmm. So when I say good or bad, I mean, we mean it. And she told me recently that she is glad that I was there throughout it all. But she said if she had to choose again, she'd choose me again. And that just meant the world to me. And Dr. Vibe, got to tell you, you're in Canada.
Yes.
There's a guy that when we stopped talking to each other, once we got angry, there's a guy that was really really instrumental in bringing us back together. His name is Michael Clemens.
Pinball, yes. You and Pinball could be like twin sons of different mothers.
Exactly. Well, Pinball.
Yes, and his beautiful wife. Oh my God. Oh wow. Pinball, wow. I'm gonna have to message him and tell him about this.
You got to tell him, because he had everybody kept telling me, you got to meet Michael. You got to meet Michael Clemens. He had graduated and was working on an MBA. And he had come back. I think he was going to play for the Kansas City Chiefs or something. But everybody kept saying, you got to meet him. You got to meet him. They felt like we had similar personalities. We're both little guys with big hearts. And when he came back, We met. He took me under his wing.
Oh my goodness.
He'd take me traveling with him. I mean, he was my big brother on that campus, and he wasn't the type of friend who only told you what you wanted to hear. He was that guy that said, "Hey, you know you're wrong." You know,
Wow.
and Marla would go to him too and complain about me. So I mean, he was that person in between that made sure we worked it out.
Pinball.
That's right. You make sure you let him know.
I'm gonna make sure I let him know. That's the, you know, that is one of the most popular men in Toronto history.
Well, guess I can say I know why. I absolutely know why. You know what? He's got the faith of of a bunch of men. So I mean, he was that role model in so many ways for me. Came from, you know, humble beginnings.
Yes.
And never allowed it to go to his head. I remember when he bought his car, he had a Maxima. And back then that car was like, wow.
Yes.
And he said, "Hey, it's no big deal. You want to drive it?" That's how he treated me. So if you saw him, you saw me, because I was tagging along and he was teaching me along the way. At one time, he wanted me to try out for the what do you call it? The
Argonauts.
Yeah, he wanted me. He said I was good enough to try out. So I mean, that's how instrumental he was in our life.
Yeah, folks, for those who don't know, Michael Pinball Clements and his beautiful wife, Diane, I mean, servant hearts.
That's right.
And
that's right.
Always believe in the good in people.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, look him up online. I'm sure there's some videos in YouTube. I've seen him in speaking action. I've seen him in one-to-one action.
That's right.
And he has a real gift, especially when it comes to men and boys.
That's right.
Of finding their heart.
That's right. He did that for me. So he was one guy. I had people that I worked with at the hospital.
Yeah.
That, you know, they knew I was in school. So after the patients were put to bed, you know, they'd say, "Go in there and study." Wow. And look, they would say, "Go study," but listen to this. They would end up waking me up before the shift was over. So I say it that way so I don't get anybody in trouble.
Got it. Let me ask, why did you pursue the field of study that you have?
Oh man, you know what? Because I wanted to know who I was. You know, granted, I've always had a servant heart. I'm from a family of servant leaders, and you know that those terms are thrown around a lot. But when I talk about servant leadership, I'm saying if serving is beneath you, then leadership is above you. That's how I think of it. But I ended up majoring at the College of William and Mary. I have degrees in anthropology and psychology and a minor in education. So long before I got my master's, two master's degrees and a doctorate. But I wanted to understand me. My mom, everybody was so concerned about me when I'm being gang affiliated and things of that nature, sending me to this counselor, that therapist. None of the therapists looked like me.
Yeah.
And that didn't have to be a disconnect, Dr. Vibe, but it was because they they weren't even able to understand what I was saying half the time. There was just a huge disconnect. So I stopped talking. I'd go and I wouldn't talk. I'm like, "You don't understand me. You don't even care." I wanted to know first about me, but then I also wanted to do what they did better, because my mom believed in it. Teachers, everyone believed in that vehicle, but that vehicle was not helpful for me.
Wow.
So that's how I ended up in this field.
Well, congratulations. I want to spend the rest of our conversation really digging deep about Black fatherhood. And the sharing that you gave during that event blew my mind. Like I was calling people saying, I said, I need some help. Get me a stretcher. My mind is just like, I was out to lunch. Where do you want to start when it comes to talking about Black fatherhood?
Well,
what's in your heart?
Well, what's in my heart is I think we have to go back in history, Dr. Bob. I think, you can't heal what you don't reveal. So in America, we have a situation where history right now, Black history, isn't being allowed to be taught in certain places and areas. And what happens is they make slavery sound like it's Black history. Slavery is America's history. And when I say that, let's go back. Let's go back, Dr. Vibe, to when families were split up and sold. Okay, now I'm not getting to the deep trauma now, but that's traumatic. Families are broken up and sold. Let's go back to when maybe the slave master's wife had a headache that evening, and the slave owner went to the quarters of the slaves and grabbed someone's wife in front of them, in front of the children, and said, "I'll bring her back later."
Mm.
You want to talk about trauma?
Mm-hmm.
And if this man stands up, he's seen what happens already because they made examples. He'll get killed in front of his children. And then he has to embrace his wife. His wife has to embrace him after this horrendous act has occurred. Dr. Vibe, nobody's talking about this. Nobody's talking about it. We act like it didn't happen. This has happened. Black men were raped. I mean, I'm telling you what these books on my shelf. So when you take all of that into consideration, you have transgenerational trauma.
Yes.
You have this trauma that has implications on today's Black men. And what does it mean? It means if I care too much for my Black woman or any woman for that matter, she can be taken away from me at a moment's notice. I mean, these are things that these archetypes, this ideology is passed on. And we don't account for that. We want to blame people on their present day circumstances without looking at not only their present history. There's trauma right now in families, but look at where we've come from. Look at what was done to Black families. And when you look at that, when you truly dissect that, it's a wonder that Black men are standing today,
Mm-hmm.
that are standing and being accounted for. Because that, Dr. Vibe, I don't think I would be able to be having this conversation with you. I don't think I'd be here based on what's in my blood. I mean, that's and everybody says you got to be careful what you say in the present day because you weren't there. I get that. But at the same time, I just, Black men being whipped in front of their families to make a point. All of this. So what happens? Did it just end when slavery ended? Did the thoughts of that? When once slavery was ended, were we healed?
No.
That was it, right? Slavery was ended, and we're better. We're much better. We're productive. We're living healthy relationships as dads and fathers and uncles. Come on. There's transgenerational trauma that we don't talk about. And we talk about it, and anytime we talk about that, we talk about it from a Black perspective when it was America perspective. It wasn't just a Black history. So Doc, that's the deepest level of it. And do people overcome that? Yes, they do. However, depending on where you live and what's being floated down in your lineage, there's still things that go on as a result of that.
Let's go a little deeper. Black men and trauma. What aspects of trauma are you seeing in a number of Black men and Black fathers today?
I'm seeing trauma that's very similar to survival. Not being seen as a human being, not knowing, this is probably the most interesting. Someone told me, I did a seminar and I told some young people, Black young people, I said, if you're stopped by the police, 3 C's, remain calm, control your feelings, and then call of action, not on the street, do it afterwards. And then someone realistically said to me, you can still do all of that, Dr. Brown, and be killed. So you want to talk about a foreshortened future syndrome. You want to talk about a learned helplessness? So what is that saying? I mean, there's so many inherent messages that come from that trauma I talked about. The fact that how many Black people know inherently that you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. You know, these are things that aren't talked about. And it's not blaming anybody in present day. And that's the issue. The issue today is that once you bring it up, people think that you're saying you did it. No, guess what? I wasn't around, you weren't around. What we can do is something about it to keep it from perpetuating today. And that's kind of where my head is. For Black men in trauma, we have to let Black men know that it's okay to get help. We got to stop saying man up, or I mean, you know, all the machismo types of things that can be said. You know, men don't cry, suck it up. No, we have feelings. You're gonna tell me I wouldn't? The last 11 months, I've cried more than I've cried in my life, and I grew up hard. I cried these 11 months. My person. Not you say you my wife, my bride, my lover. My person was in pain that this learned individual couldn't do anything about. I was no match for the side effects of chemotherapy.
Wow.
No match. I thought I would only ever give my wife a sponge bath on our anniversary. There were times throughout her chemotherapy that she couldn't bathe herself. Doc, when I tell you, so we have to be able to feel. And when we don't feel, the fear becomes that if we bottle it up so much, the fear becomes that if we let it out, it's going to be explosive. And that's what the world already thinks of us. And I tell Black men all the time, no, it doesn't have to come out like that. You actually can control how it comes out. Talk to someone. And the more you let a little bit out at a time, you'll feel better, you'll get better. And guess what? And if it all comes out at one time, you'll be in a safe space to allow that to happen. So we got to stop stigmatizing mental health as it pertains to Black men. We got to stop this machismo kind of thing that's happening when it comes to Black men. You know, we're seen as tough, aggressive, and some of us are truly buying into the stereotype. And we don't have to. Everybody is a study of one. All of us are studies of one. We're all uniquely different, and it's okay. So I would really like to see us as men allow ourselves to be a person first, to be a human first. You know, we're really good at being human. We're not good at being humane to ourselves and others. So
Wow.
I'd like to see that.
Wow. Ooh. Well, let's go further in regards to Black fathers, Black men. Let's take a look over the last 16 months. The world has changed drastically.
Right.
From your lens, how has it impacted Black fathers and Black men?
Oh, tremendously. And first of all, we can't really talk about much in the present without talking about the past.
Sure.
So let's talk about the pandemic. So the pandemic has brought about so many different changes. But now you're saying we have to take a shot to be vaccinated against the virus. Now, guess what? There are Black men who remember the Tuskegee syphilis study.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they didn't call it syphilis. They called it the Tuskegee study. But what they really did was inject Black men with syphilis. Now, guess what? Do I believe that that's happening now? No. Now, guess what? Do I believe that it could? I think it could, but I don't think it is. I think there are more checks and balances. I think the people at the top, I mean, I think we have more people that are concerned about the welfare of everybody, regardless of their language, age, race, religion, gender, education, disability, economic status, and sexual orientation than any one group. So I believe that. But do you know how many don't?
What?
You know how many don't, and that's not the only study. I can cite a bunch of studies, but I don't want us to live in the history, in the past tonight. I want us to kind of talk about now. But that's been a major challenge. A major challenge for Black men is like, I'm not going to let you do to me what I know you did to other Black men in the past. That's one. The job market, the labor market.
Oh, wow.
The labor market. How are Black men treated with a Black father and a Black mom? And as much as we need our queens, don't get me wrong. If a woman needs support for a child or doesn't have the means for support, there are programs. If a Black male does not have support for the child, there's incarceration. Help me understand that. So, I mean, it's a reality. I don't know if it's a reality in Canada.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
yes, it is.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. It's a reality. So let's talk about that. I mean, so how is it that when you look at me, you don't give me the benefit of the doubt? There's something about me that makes you think the worst. And that's perception. That's what I work on a lot. Perception and perspective. That's what I did in the master class you saw. So that's what I help people with the most, is that we have to be able to see the tree and the seed with children, with each other. We have to be able to see and know that genetics loads the gun. We don't have a choice in our hue, but the environment pulls the trigger. So we got to make sure that everybody has an environment that's challenging, healthy, engaging, safe, and supporting. Everybody. And I got to feel that. I have to feel that. That's why the talk of inclusivity today. Diversity is usually a given. And when I come to Canada, I experience more diversity than a little bit when I'm in Canada. Inclusion is a choice. Inclusion is a choice. So what I'm saying, don't invite me to the party to check off a box. If you're going to truly be inclusive, invite me to the party. Make sure you got music that I like from my culture. And guess what? Ask me to dance. And if you really want to get inclusive, get to know me and know that I'm an introvert and I'm really waiting to go home.
Nice. What are Black men telling you? What are Black men and fathers telling you? What's going on in their hearts? What's going on in their minds?
You know what? It's so frustrating. That's what they're saying. I'm frustrated. I'm seeing what's happening to Black men in this country. I'm seeing how we're treated. I'm seeing that the jails are overcrowded. I'm seeing that I can't get a break. I'm seeing that this is what they're saying. We know it's not everybody, but they feel like when they leave their homes, they're on the battlefield. What is that like? You want to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder? You don't have to go to war to experience what Black men experience every single day. When post-traumatic stress disorder came about from world wars, Black men are doing this daily. And the issue is we're not recognizing it. We're looking at the outcomes as opposed to the antecedents.
Do you feel that Black men are not controlling their narrative?
That's an excellent question. I think we can control our narrative, but when you're in a society that the narrative can be swayed so easily, like the point of, I don't know, maybe there was a country where somebody said the election was stolen and people believed it. When you believe, when things can be swayed so easily, I mean, and as a Black man, how you're seen and where you position.
Oh yeah.
What do you think about your voice? What do you think about your voice? That's why I take what I do so seriously. That's why I'm on your show, Dr. Vibe. I turn down more of these than I accept. Matter of fact, if you look back, I haven't done one in a year.
Wow.
But the point is, I'm on your show because I know what you stand for. I know what you're about. I know you're about love, light, and insight. But I also know that you know the real.
I'm on the battlefield.
You're on the battlefield. You know the real. And by you knowing the real, people are going to get the love, light, and insight, but they're also going to get the truth.
I received that. I'll give you a little backstory, and I'll love to get your commentary on it. About 3 years ago, I was asked to host an event called Minding Our Minds. And it was an event for Black fathers and mental health. 2 days before the event, guess how many fathers signed up?
How many?
3. Guess how many showed up the night of the event?
I'm afraid to say.
Take a guess. No.
1?
30.
Okay.
So you being a much more experienced facilitator than myself, me just working up to the Doc Speaks level. You should have your own speakers academy, by the way. Just a thought.
We do.
Okay. Well, we may need to talk then. All right.
We do.
All right.
So we're always looking for good people.
We need to chat offline. Absolutely. So I had my flip chart ready, and a higher power told me, ask this question to the men. I asked them, how many of you men have or had a good relationship with your father? 2 hands went up. That's where we landed for 3 hours.
That's right.
Can you add value to that? Because a lot of people don't, especially our women, don't understand how impactful that relationship, whatever it was, impacts how they are fathering today.
You know what, Dr. Vibe, I kind of wish you would write a book on that subject, because what happens when we think of women, particularly they say women with relational issues, you think they have daddy issues, but I found that more men have daddy issues than women.
Talk to me.
So, and when I say that, it's all what happens in a therapeutic setting. Oftentimes, moms will triangulate with their sons, and instead of I'll just use it. It almost is analogous to dating your son.
Mm-hmm.
Spending time, that kind of more time with your son than your husband. And children sometimes, the sons grow up to think, dad is kind of extraneous part of the relationship. And what happens then when discipline becomes an issue, when it comes time to teach the child, when it comes to right and wrong, if the mother is on that friend level with the child and dad is trying to be the disciplinarian, then it's 2 against 1. How often is that dynamic? So then you get dads sometimes that feel like they can't win and they bow out. And this is really, from a research perspective, most mothers overfunction in relationships anyway. And when I say overfunction, it's not because they have to. Most mothers, the caretaking and the nurturing, both do, but mothers will want to take the kid to the soccer practice and to this practice and to this event and go to that event. And if fathers aren't necessarily invited or encouraged to come, most dads would say, I'd rather work. And it's not that, it's not just earning potential. We know as fathers that we got to be there. In our family, we have a saying, guess what? I have to work. I may not be able to make every single game, but you better believe I'm not going to miss the majority of them. So I teach my children the reality of life. So I don't think that we take into consideration the dynamic when it comes to mothers who overfunction, and for that matter, husbands, the one spouse over functioning and not allowing room for the other person to participate. Now, you could say that person has a right or has a responsibility to stand up and get involved. But guess what? If someone's telling you that I'll do this, then guess what? It's freeing me up to do more in a different way. So as men, we have to make sure that we make space for ourselves. I found it with my wife. When the things that she would do. I mean, I'm going to run off and I'm going to take the grandchildren here or there. I'm like, hey, I want to go. So, and it's not like she's trying to slight me. It's just that she's ready to do it. And I could be working when she's doing it. And sometimes she might think she's helping me, but I want to be involved too. Mm. So I just think that we overlook some of the most common scenarios that it's not that men only want to be protectors and providers. I mean, of course that's important based on history, but we have to be nurturers. We have to be nurturers. And when you talk about relationships with dads, with their own dads, it's paramount that we know that we can't change someone else's behavior. Oftentimes when we say a father didn't have a good relationship with their father, immediately we put the onus on the person that's in front of us. What if the dad didn't want a relationship? What if the dad was hard to love and knew he was hard to love? So we have to remember that everyone does the best they can with the information they have at the time they have it.
Yeah.
So we have to be cognizant of that. But as I told you earlier, I think more men have the daddy issues than women, and that's from a therapeutic perspective, and even in my circle of friends.
That's interesting. That is really interesting. And it's interesting you're saying about another personal story from my journey, and you've made me think. There's a lot of things we got to chat about on offline here. That for many years, when I didn't behave, my dad gave me the belt, and it hurt me. And do you know how many years it was pent up inside of me to tell my dad, "You hurt me"?
That's right.
And many years ago, I said, it's my time, because I came to peace with myself saying, whatever he says, I'm going to be able to live with, because I just to say, you know what, whatever the outcome is, I'm ready for it. That took time just to build up to that moment.
Yes. And Dr. Vibe, when I hear that, I always have to think back, and the access and opportunities that our fathers had. I'm sure my father didn't know time out.
No,
I'm sure.
My dad was a teacher for 38 years in the same school. I felt more like a student than a son a lot of the time.
Exactly. So, I don't think my dad anybody ever approached him to say, come to this seminar on effective parenting practices or best practices as fathers. I don't think the access was there. And I can promise you that if it wasn't somebody from the community that he felt like he could relate to, he wouldn't have listened anyway. So again, I go back to when people do the best they can with what they have where they are. And I definitely can understand how that hurt you. And my heart goes out.
No, well, just to finish off the story.
Yeah.
So I said to him, look, as he was lying on his bed with his music, had speakers underneath his bed. He loves his music. That's another story. And I said, Dad, I'm always going to love you, but when you gave me the belt, it hurt me. And he said the perfect line. He said, son, I didn't know any other way. Bam. Yeah. So that's where I wanted to come link into what he didn't know. So that broke the sort of psychological chain. It wasn't because he didn't like me or this or that. He just didn't know anything better.
Right. And what you were doing, he knew he had to stop your world. So, I tell you, Dr. Vibe, if there was something my dad said to me or did to me it was unbeknownst to him until I brought it up years later.
Yep.
When I saw my dad later, and I hung out with him as an 18-year-old, and he's telling me the same thing my mom told me. You know, he woke up one day and said, "I don't want this anymore," and went back to live with his mother and in a different state. When he said to me, after getting to know me, he didn't say it to me at 18, but he said it years later. We were sitting down talking, and he said, "You know what, son?" He said, "You're more of a man at your age now than I ever was or could be." Now, that was crushing. That was crushing because of my ideals of a father. I still needed guidance. I'm still figuring it out. I'm still, what do you do when your kids aren't doing right? What do you do when you have a disagreement with your wife? I'm still figuring it out. He told me that. It was crushing. But then as I drove home to my state, my home state, I started crying because it wasn't about me. It made me think about him. My father's dad died when my father was 13 years old. And you know what my father blames it on? Not a health condition. He said my grandfather worked himself to death.
Wow.
He said he struggled, he worked hard. His father wanted them to have, and whenever you ask my father, he said he died of working too hard. So he was always, when he said that to me, you know, and I thought about it, and I said, "Well, Dad, let me tell you what I have learned from you." and I told him, "You tell me all the time to take breaks. Thank you, because I don't think about that sometimes because, you know, I'm a go-getter. You tell me to make sure that everybody in my life knows I love them." I mean, these are the things. So I had to show him, because it was almost as if he was using a societal standard to measure me as a man, as if I was a doctor, as if I lived a certain way and I with my wife. And I mean, so it was really different. And I think a lot of men today don't know what it means to be their man, not society's man, but their man. I brought a book on tonight.
Please.
And this book is Bringing Black Boys into Manhood. And it's an old book. I think it was, I'm going to tell you when it was published. 1985. And it's by Doctors Nathan and Julia Hare. Doctors Nathan and Julia Hare. And basically what they're saying is the same things that we're saying tonight, is that oftentimes society, television, media will depict what it is to be a man for young boys and young men. And when we do that, it's dangerous. You know, if I'm looking at videos to be a man, then, you know, particularly hip hop videos, I'm unsure that I'm going to get 100% positive messages.
Well, since you brought up a book, I'm going to bring up another book.
Yeah.
This book changed my life as a Black man, as a fatherhood and manhood advocate of Black men and all men. This book was written in 1990.
I hear you.
The name of the book, Black Men, Obsolete, Single, and Dangerous, African-American Family in Transition. If you want to find out about Black men, even though this book, 20,
yeah,
this is still today one of the most relevant books I've ever read about Black men in my life.
Did you hear some of its references earlier in our conversation?
Yes. And it was the first time I got really the light shone on me that the author said, Black men have to realize that we come from a communal heritage. North American is a European heritage. It's like a round peg into a square hole.
That's right. competition versus cooperation.
Yeah, that book, I keep it on my desk.
Okay.
And it's interesting, the number of Black men I've shown that book to, and they go, I got that book. And that makes me feel, that makes me feel good. So if anyone wants a good book for Black men, that one, timeless.
That's right.
Timeless. That's right. Timeless. I want to talk about Black fatherhood and provider. Want to get your thought, because to me, provider is not just financial.
Right, but that's what normally is expected in the wider world, that you have to be able to pay for the children you have. And provider means being a nurturer, being a caretaker. If you're not with the mother, respecting the mother, providing respect, providing compassion. So being a provider means being a part of a household, particularly if you're there. But when you're not there, it's even more important. So we got to get out of the stereotype of being protectors and providers. And you know why we want to be protectors? Because we don't want anyone to come into our home and think they can take, our spouses out and do as they wish. I mean, I'm just being real.
Yeah.
with the archetypes. So, and I tell you something else, Dr. Vibe, that we don't think about. We don't think about the importance of the union. I was telling someone the other day, they have a child and they're unmarried. And regardless of how you feel about marriage or being married, but I was giving them research. And the research is, if you're with someone in an environment with a child, with a significant other, and you're not married, the experiences of that child are very similar to you being a single parent.
Wow. Wow. You just made me think about a whole pile of people in 30 seconds.
Exactly. That child, the outcomes and how that child and the things that they're likely, doesn't mean they will. It's not causation, it's correlation. That the outcomes for that child are very similar to if that child was in a single parent household. And people say, well, how? It's only physical. No, it's not. It's the ideology, what goes with the values. It's all of that.
Yeah, it's so true. And I know I've read some of those studies saying that the more the father is involved in the raising of the children, the better potential outcomes are for the child or the children.
Yes. And then we got to think about what is it about commitment for Black men? Well, guess what? It's recapitulating the trauma. If I love you, if I put nothing above you, and then someone takes you from me.
Yeah. It's just really, I was saying this in, but it just makes it, are things getting better?
Yeah, I know they're getting better, because there are Dr. Vibes in the world that are talking about it, and then there are fathers that are listening. So once you can recognize your behavior and the pattern of behavior that you're on, you can do some course correction. When you think about commitment and you wonder, I mean, it's really protective factors. They're maladaptive, but they're protective factors. I don't want a commitment because, yeah, you might leave me, but it's deeper than that. Where did that come from with your dad? Where did it come from with his father? Where did it come from with and your father? You get guess what? It's devastating to have something snatched, to have your family broken up in your face. That's devastating. So how much of that has transpired to you? So we got to talk about commitment and why there's a lack of commitment. We got to talk about the fact of the stereotypes that are now being thrust upon Black women, that they're the backbone, and guess what? They need compassion and grace just like everybody else. But when we fall for these societal stereotypes and these societal narratives, when you fall for them, you end up living them. Like you just said, we come from a communal relations, tribes.
Heritage.
Exactly. And communal, working together. That's collaboration. Name a country today that's not competitive, that doesn't encourage competition from the day the child is born in any type of school, public, private, charter. Competition. And that's not who we are.
Go ahead. Go for it. Go for it, Doc. Go for it.
I'll get a little wild though. But yeah.
That's all right. It's all my audience can take it. My audience can take it.
Okay. So that's an issue. That when something's in you, but you live in a society that is the antithesis of that, there's conflict.
Oh, shout out to Josh Linton. He actually is a daddy doula.
Ah, kudos.
Yes, and doing fantastic work with dads based in Milwaukee.
Oh, okay. I just left Wisconsin last week.
Oh, jeez.
I was just in Wisconsin for it was an actual corporation. I was working with them on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So here's my question. D&I is hot, but when do organizations ask you to talk about Black fatherhood?
You know what? I talk about it inherently. I got to tell you, the only organization that ever truly says, I want you to talk about Black fatherhood is an early childhood organization in our country called Head Start. Head Start was came out of the war on poverty. When they saw that community action agencies were well suited in environments to truly help those in the trenches. So a program came about called Head Start for low-income children and families that has shown just tremendous success. And Head Start organizations will often contact me to talk about Black fathers, to uplift Black fathers. In fact, and this is what's so great about it. This is early childhood. So the children are 3 to 4, and the fathers are there, and they're coming out, and they're involved, and they want to know what to do. And I tell them some of the most simple things, like, you're involved now. Please don't think that as your child gets older, you can be less involved, because that's what most people think. What ends up happening, you need to be even more involved in middle school and in high school. So that's when your child is going to be confronted with conflicts, and they're going to need to know how to resolve them. And if you're not around, guess who's teaching them? Society.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the school shootings today. Look at the shootings that are going on just in society, how rampant things are. Guess
Chicago.
Well, you know what? In Milwaukee, I didn't know where I was. The guy told me it was called Milwaukee, and I'd never heard of that. I was in maybe Madison. But he said, hey, this is called, and I said, I've been coming here for years. I'd never heard of that. And I'd like to ask our doula colleague if he'd ever heard of that, because I had no idea.
Wow.
So yeah.
How critical of a time are we in right now for the future of Black fatherhood?
Oh, it's critical. And you'll get this, Doc. We're in the last of the last days.
What do you mean by that?
You're going to make me go there.
Yes, I am, because my audience needs to hear it, and they want to hear it. They have a certain expectation of Dr. Vibe that he goes deep. He ain't gonna. This is not light. This is deep, because we want to leave them thinking.
Okay, so, and I think regardless of your faith, so you don't have to be Christian, Muslim, Baha'i, witness, whatever, and you might not even be a believer, so to speak, but just to understand that the things that we're going through right now in society are unprecedented. That, we could have someone that's capable or not capable of critical thought and press a button and bring the world to war. So when I say we're in the last of the last days, I think when I was growing up, I'd hear the elders say things like, "These are the last days," and they talk about different signs. Well, I think the more people that you are able to sway emotionally, not intellectually, emotionally, that the more dangerous society becomes. And I mean, Doc, I've seen it in so many ways. I can go to, look at gangs for now. Look at gangs, Chicago gangs, street gangs. What are happening in gangs right now that's different from yesteryear? Well, guess what? The OG, so to speak, the men of the gangs are in prison. So what do you have? You have a bunch of young people, young boys, so to speak, that are making rules as they go. Now, I'm not saying gangs were ever good, but I'm saying without that leadership, without the men saying we don't do it there, we protect the elders, we don't do it here, they're children. Now you have what's going on in gangs today is you have young people leading themselves without the knowledge, the information, or the wisdom. And people are reluctant to address that, but that's the real deal. That's what's in Chicago right now. When you look at the factions in Chicago and the leaders that were a part, guess what? They're gone. And there was segments of town that, hey, and it was known, you don't go there. This is where it happens. If you don't want it, move away from there. It's come downtown Chicago. They since the pandemic, they would run into the high-end stores, grab whatever they wanted, and run back out. So now to go in those stores in Chicago, you have to go one by one. There's a line that you can only go in one at a time with an armed guard standing at the front. So when I talk about what we didn't say is the importance of black men, that the world needs us. That's what I want black men to know. We need you. I see you. We see you. You're valued. And there's some that would say it's because of your strength. It's because of your resilience that makes you even more of a threat. So I just want to make sure that we have acknowledged that we need them, we see them, and we value them.
Good. Well, as we wind down, do you have any call to action for, let me go into three groups. Call to action for Black women.
Yes, I think my call to action for Black women would be to be less judgmental and more understanding.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, and I say that when we immediately think the worst, I want you to know that we're getting that every day. Every day when we leave our homes. Our home should be a place where we can exhale. We go out to fight every single day. So don't be so quick to judge. Attempt to understand. And it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Black men are good at that, understanding the women in our lives. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, as a Black man, we need to be understood. We need that safe space that I can let you know how I feel. I don't have to keep it in. And I'm keeping it in if I come to a home that's supposed to be a safe place and you're beating me up too.
Well, I'll just add on to that. First of all, I learned from my indigenous brothers, I now say a safe and brave space.
I like that.
Right? Because definitely. A Black man can be safe. He's like this.
Exactly. Won't speak up. Exactly.
But when it's brave, because there are many Black fathers and Black men that are screaming and nothing's coming out.
Exactly. Every single day.
And Black boys.
Right. Every day we go into the world, we get tiny little knife cuts. Tiny little knife cuts day in and day out. I want to come home and at least give them some healing attention. I don't want to come home and that be the place for me to bleed out.
Next up, your message for Black men. Take your time.
Yeah. I would like Black men to know, of all the things that I could say, I would like them to know that it's okay to feel and heal.
Okay. And then finally, Black fathers.
I would say constantly remember that more is caught than is taught.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, before we let you go, I want you to talk about Doc Speaks.
Okay. Doc Speaks is my website. I do, that's where people can find out who I am. If you're interested in having deeper conversation with me, you can go to my Patreon. We call it In the Balcony with Dr. Adolph Brown, as opposed to the basement. The balcony is that place where you're pulling other people up. The basement is that place where you're dragging others down. The balcony is a wonderful, safe, and brave space, thanks to my brother, Dr. Vibe, for all. It's all about love, light, and insight. And if you're interested in becoming a presenter, consultant, or speaker under my tutelage, docandfriends.com.
Well, I know someone that may be contacting you on that. I just I said, as Freddie Coleman on ESPN would say, I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Well, that is fantastic. I'm going to put so Doc Speaks website, docspeaks.com. You can find him on Facebook, Doc Speaks, Twitter, at Doc Speaks, Instagram, at Adolph Brown. So those are all one of the many places. There's more, but I just listed those for right now. Dr. Brown, thank you for what you have done, what you are doing, and what you will be doing going forward. I am absolutely definite that we got some stuff to do together.
I know, without a doubt. And you know what, Doc? And I want my brothers and sisters that are out there watching to know, doctor is what I do. Adolph is who I am. There's a difference.
Final comment here from Josh. It's more than knowing we're seeing. We need to rise into position again and to have the Black home become the Mecca of the revolution.
That's right. That's right. I agree.
Very well put. All right, Doc. Thank you so much. I have a feeling when you come back from your next jump, we're going to have a round two.
Let's do it. Let's go deeper.
All right.
There's much I wanted to say.
No, that's part two. This is an appetizer, and most importantly, to you and your family and the Black men, the Black fathers, and the Black families you are helping with your heart work. Remember everyone to give themselves grace.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Wow, that's why we say this is the home of epic conversations. Because I don't know about you guys, but that was an epic conversation, big time. I'd like to say thanks for those who caught it live, especially Harrison Family Vlogs and Daddy Dula, my man Josh Liston, as in Sunny. Sunny as in Sunny Liston. Folks, I am full. My heart is full, not my belly. My heart is full today. And I just like to say thank you, everyone, for taking the time to watch. As always, I always close out with this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And remember to give yourselves grace. Thanks very much. And follow us, YouTube and Instagram, so you get notified when we continue to have epic conversations. And if you want to bring any topics, please contact me. God bless. Peace and well. Keep the faith and walk good.